What's going on, Bama Nation? I'm Zack Aitken, and welcome to today's episode of Crimson Tide Today. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, and for all updates on the show and your Crimson Tide, follow my X and Instagram account at ZAitken7. So we have a flip alert to begin today's show. On Wednesday, three-star receiver Cedric Simmons out of Selma, Alabama, flipped his commitment from the Auburn Tigers to your Alabama Crimson Tide. Now, if you've been following his recruitment, you know how wild it's been. Just a few weeks ago, Simmons committed to Auburn over Alabama, and it looked like Alex Golish's staff, they had won one of the bigger in-state recruiting battles in the 2027 class. But recruiting is never over until those papers are signed. Fast forward to this week, and Alabama has flipped the talented Selma receiver back to the Crimson Tide. This isn't just about adding another three-star prospect. Simmons is one of the most explosive playmakers in Alabama high school football. Last season, he led the state with over 2,000 yards receiving. He's got speed, big playability, and the kind of upside that college coaches love to develop, like a diamond in the rough, so to speak. For Alabama head coach Kalen DeBoer, this is another example that Alabama is still winning battles for elite in-state talent. Even after an early Auburn commitment, the Tide stayed involved, kept recruiting, and eventually they closed the deal. For Auburn, this is definitely a frustrating loss. Anytime you lose a commitment to your biggest rival, it's going to get attention. And when it's an in-state prospect, it hurts even more because these are the kind of recruiting battles that fans are going to remember. I'm glad to see Simmons is on track to being back to wearing the crimson and white. It's been widely reported that he grew up a huge Alabama fan, so something felt a little off when he committed to Auburn at the end of June. Simmons and Alabama receiver coach Derek Nix, they built a strong relationship during the recruitment process. Simmons appreciates how Coach Nix isn't only concerned with football. He wants Simmons the opportunity to be successful on the field, in the classroom, and in life after football. So we're still a ways off from the early signing period in December. So Kalen DeBoer and company, they're going to have to maintain a strong relationship to keep Simmons on board. But this is a big time flip, and I'm super excited to see Cedric Simmons in the crimson and white, and hopefully we'll be able to get those papers signed later in December. Moving on, when Alabama fans normally talk about recruiting and transfers, it's usually the bigger names that dominate the conversation. But what if the most important addition isn't the player that catches the most touchdowns? What if it's the guy that's doing all the dirty work? That player, it might be tight end Josh Ford. Josh Ford transferred in from Oklahoma State, and if you're judging him strictly by receiving stats, nothing's really going to jump off the page. He only caught 13 passes in 16 games and 2 touchdowns. But that's not why Alabama brought him to Tuscaloosa. Alabama coach Kalen DeBoer, he's recently praised Ford's impact during spring practice, saying his physical mindset, it's already become contagious on the roster. According to DeBoer, Ford has been putting defenders on their backs while he's blocking. And that's exactly what Alabama's trying to identify and what they're trying to build on their roster. After last season, one of the biggest questions surrounding the Crimson Tide was whether the offense had enough toughness in the running game. The offensive line has new faces. There's going to be some questions at tackle, and establishing a physical run game, it's going to be critical. That's where Ford is going to be so valuable. At 6'6" and almost 270 pounds, he's built like almost an extra offensive lineman than the traditional pass-catching tight end. During his career at Oklahoma State, he logged more than 300 blocking snaps and allowed 0 sacks while just giving up 1 pressure. Those are elite numbers for a blocking tight end. His presence is also going to give Alabama more flexibility offensively. If you pair Ford with a pass-catching tight end like Caleb Edwards, like we discussed earlier this week, suddenly Alabama can lean heavily on their 12 personnel package, which is 1 running back and 2 tight ends in the formation. That's important because it keeps defensives guessing. The offense can run or throw from the same formation without substituting, and it makes it much harder for defenses to predict what's coming. And if Marshall Pritchett develops into another reliable receiving threat, Alabama can experiment even more with 3 tight end sets, and that's becoming really popular in the NFL. Will Josh Ford lead Alabama in receptions and make highlight reels every Saturday? Probably not. But it's not always about guys who score the most touchdowns. If Josh Ford delivers the physicality, the blocking, and the attitude that Kalen DeBoer is expecting, he could quietly become one of the most valuable additions on Alabama's roster. And maybe the missing piece that brings balance and toughness back to the Crimson Tide on offense. Moving on, I want to talk about one of the strengths on Alabama's football team. A couple years ago, if you would have asked Alabama fans what the biggest concern on the roster was, a lot of people probably would have pointed straight to the secondary. There were a lot of new faces. There was a new defensive system. Nick Saban had retired. Malachi Moore was the only returning starter. There were questions everywhere in the defensive backfield. If you fast forward to today and that same secondary, it's the best position group on the entire Alabama roster. The turnaround has been remarkable, and a lot of that credit belongs to defensive coordinator Kane Womack and the secondary coach Maurice Linguist. In just 2 seasons, they've taken a unit that was considered a weakness and turned it into one of the most dominant defensive backfields in the SEC, but it could be the best in all of college football. I feel like it all starts with cornerback Xavier Brown. Brown burst onto the scene as a freshman back in 2024, and he already looks like one of the premier corners in the country. He has the size, the instincts, and the ball skills that NFL scouts love, so don't be surprised that Brown's a first round pick in 2027. And across from him is Dejon Lee. He's one of Alabama's fastest rising stars. Lee, he wasn't even on campus when this coaching staff was trying to establish itself, but now he's earned a starting job, which he took away from veteran Damani Jackson, and he finished the season as a freshman All SEC selection. That's a pretty impressive rise. And then if you go to the safety position, Bray Hubbard, he's already proven he's a difference maker after stepping in for the injured Keon Sabb. And now Sabb, he's going to be back being fully healthy, and he has a chance to remind everyone why expectations were so high before his injury. Red Morgan, he also gives Alabama another physical playmaker. Coaches love his aggressive style, and he always seems to find himself around the football. But what really separates this group, though, is the depth. Mercer transfer Carmelo O'Neal, he's generated plenty of buzz, and blue chip cornerbacks like Jordan Edmonds and Zion Gibson, they're also fighting for playing time as well. Chuck McDonald, he's moved inside to the slot, and he's going to be competing with Dre Kirkpatrick Jr. And at safety, Alabama can rotate players like Xavier Mincy, Ivan Taylor, and the highly touted freshman Jaira Edwards, who's one of the nation's top safety prospects coming out of high school. That's not just depth, that's competition almost every spot in the secondary. The biggest question is whether Alabama has enough talent. The biggest question isn't whether Alabama has enough talent in the defensive backfield. It's how Kane Womack and Coach Linguist are going to get all of these talented players on the field. That's a great problem for every coaching staff to have. 1 year ago, the secondary was filled with uncertainty. Today, it looks like it's going to be the heartbeat of Alabama's defense, and it could be the best defensive backfield in the SEC and maybe in the entire country. Wrapping up today's show to put a bow on it, let's do a player spotlight on one of Alabama's most important newcomers. That's going to be center Rayson Delgatti. He's expected to step in one of the most tough jobs on the roster, which is going to replace Parker Brailsford. And let's be honest, that's no small task. Brailsford, he was one of the best centers in college football during his last 2 seasons at Alabama, and even though his play dipped a little bit towards the end of last year, injuries had a lot to do with that. When he was healthy, he was the leader of the Alabama offensive line and the guy that made everything work up front. But now it's going to be Delgatti's turn. After watching some of his highlights, I think Alabama may have found a player with very similar styles to Brailsford. Maybe not necessarily from a size standpoint. I think Delgatti's a little bit bigger. He's listed at 6'3" and around 300 pounds. And just for comparison, Parker Brailsford measured just over 6'1" and about 290 pounds at the NFL Combine. But style-wise, there is a lot of similarities between these two linemen. Delgatti, he's quick, he's athletic, and he looks like he's going to be a great fit for Ryan Grubb's offense. One thing that really stood out to me is how well he moves in space. Whether he's pulling across the formation or climbing up to the second level, he gets there in a hurry. He doesn't waste movement, he doesn't take false steps, and he arrives under control. Point of attack, he delivers a strong punch, and maybe my favorite part of his game is his mentality. This is the kind of guy that plays with an edge. He's the kind of offensive lineman who wants to finish blocks. He plays through the whistle, he looks to impose his will on defenders, and he brings a level of toughness that every offensive line needs. Experience is another reason Alabama should feel good about this addition. Delgatti, he's logged more than 1,300 collegiate snaps, so this isn't a player who's still trying to learn the position. He's seen a lot of football, and that experience should help ease his transition into the most demanding position on the offensive line. The center is responsible for much more than just snapping the football. He's identifying defensive fronts, communicating protections, making blocking calls, and serving as the quarterback's eyes before the snap. These responsibilities, they become even more important with a new quarterback and an offense that's looking to take a step forward. If Racing Delgado can provide the same consistency, leadership, and physical level of play that Alabama got from Parker Brailsford, then the Crimson Tide, we should be once again in a really good spot at the center position. And if that happens, don't be surprised if Delgado ends up becoming one of the most important players for Alabama's offense this season. So, guys, that's going to do it for Crimson Tide today. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel and drop ideas for future segments that you want covered in a future show. Until next time, you guys have a great weekend, and we'll catch you guys on Monday. Roll Tide.